Emotion is one of the things that makes us human, but it's also one of the things we share with all other mammals. Why do we have emotions when we are so rational compared to other animal species? We have the gift of language, we can build technologies, and yet we share these same basic emotions. Well, one reason, of course, is because we have them through evolutionary reasons, and they've never gone away. But it turns out that emotions are enormously useful for people and have many purposes. They help us guide behavior, they help us make quick decisions in dangerous situations, and we can deal with threats and opportunities. So emotions are shortcuts, almost instinctive ways of guiding our behaviors. We can see emotions in visual expressions, and these convey our emotions to other people and even some other animals. So emotions are brain circuits that stem back to the early days of mammalian species, and the same emotions that we have are presumably shared with many other mammals. The face in particular is the window of emotion, and when a psychologist named Paul Ekman went to New Guinea back in the 1960s and studied cultures there that had never experienced television or had interacted with people from other countries, uh, what he found was they had the same basic emotions as people in North America and around the world. So these 6 basic emotions appear to be universal, and further evidence is provided by people who are blind from birth, who respond with similar emotions when they win or lose at sporting events, even though they've never seen those emotions in other people. So it seems that they're generated spontaneously. We can also look at other primates and see similar facial expressions. When we compare humans and chimpanzees, many of the same expressions are provided. So there seems to be certainly a very stable primate system for expressing emotions, while other mammal species do not necessarily have the same mapping between emotions and facial expressions. They have the same kinds of brain structures for the emotional system, suggesting that they do in fact experience somewhat similar emotions. The 6 basic emotions that have been listed so far are disgust, happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and surprise. Now, this is not the complete list for what people think of when they talk about emotions. So they might think of an emotion like hatred or love and so on. But these are different in nature, perhaps, and involve other parts of the brain in addition to the basic emotion system, and they may require some thought and reflection or some cognitive interpretation of the emotion. People have tried to classify emotions, and one of the most popular ways is to put it in terms of 2 dimensions. So emotions have a valence, whether they're positive or negative, and emotions have a level of activation, whether they are people are aroused or unaroused. So if people are excited about something and it's very negative, then we might have anger. If people are happy about something and it's positive, then we'd call it happiness. And if people are less activated or aroused by something, but it's negative, then we might have something more like sadness. So the thing about emotions is that it's hard to have an emotion that doesn't involve uh, some kind of strong valence, either positive or negative. So we can put emotions on a kind of circle, representing these two dimensions of activity and valence. But the center of that circle probably is hollow or empty because of the fact that emotions tend to be strong and weak emotions are not felt. Brain scanning has shown that different parts of the brain are generally handling different emotions. So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, small almond-shaped area deep inside the center of the brain, and this part handles fear in particular, but also has a role in other emotions. There's a part called the insula, where disgust is handled, as well as perceptions of the stomach and the gut and how the person is feeling. And then there is a part of the brain called the orbitofrontal cortex at the front, but at the bottom of that frontal area, and that seems to handle anger to some extent, and so on. So we have these different parts of the brain handling different emotions, but working together. And generally emotions are experienced by different parts of the brain, but with one part of the brain perhaps taking the lead. So let's come back to basic emotions. How do we know that emotions are basic? Well, when they were first defined, these 6 basic emotions, there was a lot of evidence to suggest that they were special. One was that they were distinctly universal, and there was a particular facial expression for each emotion. And these facial expressions can be recognized by people around the world. So they are shared by all humans. So there's specific activation of facial muscles for different emotions. There is also automatic triggering of these emotions. In certain situations, people will generally experience these basic emotions. And if they don't, then there's a chance that there's some kind of damage to the parts of the brain that produce those emotional responses. Another idea behind basic emotions is that they're shared with other primates. So we see them, for instance, in chimpanzees. They also begin quickly, they have rapid onset, and they last for just a period of seconds. So they're not long periods of time, in which case we tend to think of them as moods rather than emotions. And finally, they happen automatically. It's not something we can control. And we don't choose to have the emotions, we just experience them. So emotions have these properties that we share them with other mammals, and particularly with other primates. They come unbidden, we express them in our facial expressions, and they are controlled by specific parts of the brain and appear to be wired in and almost instinctive. So the challenge, of course, in understanding emotions relative to cognitive neuroscience is how do they interact with the other parts of the brain which we think of as more rational and more under our control.